Hello, day 5 of reading our Bibles. We're going to talk about Genesis 16 through 18. Incredibly interesting, strange stories again with the life of Abraham. Again, Abraham was supposed to be the father of all believers, supposed to be this example of faithfulness to God and the father of our faith, shows himself to be a chump in this section. In chapter 16, Sarah and Abraham have this promise that one day they would have a child, and through their faith, through their family, it would bless all nations. Well, they were getting impatient. Sarah's over 90 years old. Abraham is about 99 years old. And so in their impatience and lack of faith, Sarah gives Hagar, her maidservant, to Abraham, and Abraham accepts this, and he sleeps with her, and they have Ishmael. And right away, we see what happens with guilt and shame. Sarah gets angry, even though she was the one who offered this solution to their problems. She becomes angry at what's going on. And I think that happens a lot of times with sin. When we fall into a grievous sin like this, a lot of times we'll overact with anger and shame and frustration, all sorts of unwanted emotions. So, very strange situation. Sometimes my wife and I, when we're making a decision, we feel like we're making a quick, rash decision, not trusting in God. We say things like, well, we don't want to birth any Ishmaels, as a way of saying we don't want to rush into this. We want to show patience and trust in God. We don't want to make a quick decision that could cause all sorts of problems. And this does cause all sorts of problems. Supposedly, Muslims find their origin in their faith in Ishmael, this other son of Abraham. Chapter 17 is also a strange ancient practice of circumcision. God tells Abraham that he was supposed to circumcise all the children that are born in his family. And that's something that the Hebrews practiced throughout their history. But the Hebrews were not the only ones who practiced circumcision. That was a common practice in other civilizations like Egypt and other places. But very much like chapter 15, if you remember from yesterday's video, that when in ancient cultures, when they cut a covenant, and that's what the Hebrew is, they made a contract. It's called cutting a covenant. They cut those animals, and then they walk through the middle of the animals as if to say, if you break your end of the deal, if you break your side of the contract, this is what's going to happen to you. You'll be cut in half. Pretty drastic, right? And this is a similar idea. Cutting away the foreskin, that circumcision was a way of cutting a covenant as a sign to say, if you don't remain faithful to your end of the covenant, the penalty is infertility. And again, that might sound very strange to us, but remember the context of what's going on. God promised to Abraham that all nations were going to be blessed through him. And this goes back to the promise God made to Eve, that somebody from the line of Eve and Abraham and later on Judah and all these, the line of Israel, would come a savior. So our whole salvation is based on this contract, this covenant that God made with the people to bless their generations, to bless their family, because through their line, through their children would come the Savior. Another very strange story, verse chapter 18, is the account of the 3 visitors. Many people believe that those 3 visitors that came to Abraham were 2 angels and the pre-incarnate Jesus, because Abraham prays to one of them as the Lord, and the other 2 angels, after they have this meeting with Abraham and promise a child to come in a year, promise again that they'll have a child named Isaac, they leave and go to Sodom and see what's going on with Lot and the corruption going on in Sodom, and the one visitor stays back, and many people believe that he is the pre-incarnate Jesus, and Abraham prays to him and speaks to him and pleads with him, counting down, if there are 50 people in Sodom, will you destroy the city, or 45 and 30 and 35 and 25 and 20 down to 10. And it shows us the importance of the persistence of prayer. What's interesting is they couldn't find even 10 people in Sodom and Gomorrah. And what also is interesting is Abraham stops praying. You wonder if Abraham would have kept praying, kept asking, if there are 5, if there are 2, would you still destroy Sodom if that would have changed anything. So lots of strange stories here, lots of detail, but these are stories that have profound meaning, things that we should meditate on, things that we should think about. Keep reading, don't give up. These are stories that date back thousands of years before Jesus. We're talking about stuff that was 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, in a country far away, and yet they still apply to us as we meditate on God's promises, God's faithfulness, God's interaction with his people. Okay, if you have any questions, put in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe and keep sharing this with other people. Let's see how many people we can get reading the Bible.